So maybe we can jump into the fact that let's look at it on an organizational standpoint. So there are some people in this audience that are representing their organizations, either as a CEO, founders, or even HR managers. So maybe let me just throw this back to Nandini for now. In StashAway, as an organizational standpoint, what were some initiatives that your company has did, especially in the last 2 years, to adopt to this employees' mental health?
Yeah, I think, we take a lot of our cues from our teams. And, the first thing is to ensure that there is a very easy way for feedback to come to you. So we actually have an Ask Me Anything session every month, where employees can post, any questions, whether with their name or anonymously. And, the founders, along with the rest of the C-suite, answer those questions. And this has existed for us, since StashAway started. But in the last 2 years, obviously, without being able to see people face to face and being able to, get the nuance of how people are feeling in the office, this has been a really good tool for us. So, things like we realized last year, people were just not taking holidays because there was no place to go, either in our Singapore office and later in our Malaysia office. And then, we've opened 3 more offices actually during this time. And so, the first thing we said was, okay, why are people not taking time off? And largely people associate in Southeast Asia, I take a holiday, I want to go somewhere, you want to go off the island in Singapore. And because that wasn't possible, people thought, okay, I'm going to keep my leave for when I do want to travel. And so, we knew that this is going to have an impact on mental health. So we immediately moved to a what we call an unlimited leave policy. So you are not bound by your, earlier, whatever were the 2022 days. Which immediately, from a frame of mind and how people were making decisions to take a break, meant that, whatever, even if they took 3 days off, 1 week off, 2 weeks off, and just sat at home or, read books or just, did something in Singapore or in Malaysia with the restrictions, but it at least meant that they could disconnect without thinking that they are jeopardizing a more emotional holiday later on, to go on, travel or anything else. So, I think the Ask Me session was such a big, and it's still such a big source of it. We have a lot of team members, who asked more about, oh, when it opens, I don't want to go and see my family for just 1 week or 2 weeks. I want to be able to spend more time. So, we created an 8-week work from anywhere policy. We also worked on how teams can work together. So what tools are required so that people can work from anywhere, and, not be disruptive or an inconvenience to, the overall team dynamic. And then lastly, of course, we had more people asking, how are you going to be working on, what more can the company do on mental health? So we're actually going to be working in our offsite on a diagnostic tool just for people to be able to assess, what is their state? So, providing them a tool to actually understand how they are faring in their mental health. And then, looking at helping them, understand that diagnostic. So towards the end of the month, we are actually bringing that. And again, all of this came out of our Ask Me Anything sessions that are held on a monthly basis. So, by no means we think we have solved every problem. But, it's something that we just focus on is to say, okay, if things are coming up in the Ask Me Anything, then those are the places where we have to look for action points and validate.
Wonderful. So audience, to those listening, you can ask Nandini anything. Okay, put that in the chat. Put any questions that you have, burning questions or anything at all. You can ask Nandini. Okay, and So Zephyr, over to you. What do you think about what Nandini has mentioned about the Ask Me Anything or the feedback sessions? I remember you mentioning something along these lines too.
Yeah, it does. It does seem like a recurring theme with good companies where, and I define good by whatever she just said, not by the bottom line. So yeah, it does seem like a theme like that because even my wife, she works for Salesforce, and before that she was with Hootsuite, and she mentioned similar things where well-being is really, it's at the top of the whole structure. And so yes, I would say that's very important. A little bit because I've been in the creative and media space before. Maybe this is just sloppiness, but the way the world is going, I don't think it's sloppiness. And I'd like to propose that maybe we do not force someone to check in at a certain time, especially if they're not working on something time sensitive, like a meeting or a presentation, like today's afternoon talk, there's a time. But if somebody's working on their own, and we are working with grown-ups, I think it's completely fine to not force someone to report at 6 a.m. or 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. because that's not the way the human body works and the way the human mind and spirit works. If you do a little bit of research on our work system and education system, it's a 200-year-old system that just doesn't work anymore for the state of consciousness that the planet's currently at. In terms of timings and some structures. So I really enjoy what Nandini is saying and what their company is doing. And I wish more companies were like that. Also, we hear that a lot of big companies like Google, Facebook, and so on, they allow nap time inside the office. Of course, they have certain sections. You don't just nap at your desk. But that's nice. And also, I think I had another point about catching up, but Nandini's covered that. So I wanted to maybe say that companies could really teach each other a little bit about being mindful about the perspectives of others and to let them know that we understand what you're saying. Because talking is one thing. So let's say I'm talking to my CEO, for example. It's one thing, one level of making me feel comfortable that I spoke to my CEO, but it's a whole different level when the CEO replies and says, I totally understand you. Like whether that's the flavor of ice cream you like, or your difficulties at home with your kid, or difficulties with your work, it's a different level. So we need to get that level from top down, not just instructions, but letting people know that they're taken care of. So then their workplace becomes more of a bonding ground almost, rather than a headache. And of course, we cannot take the bonding ground too far, or it'll become like a hobby and drinking club, which is the opposite of getting work done. But there has to be a balance. So someone has to feel like they belong at a workplace. I feel for them to put in the work and put in what's needed and feel excited about that rather than feeling like a slave. So yeah, that's just a little bit from me.
I think your point about making sure people know that they are treated like adults is probably the underpinning of everything, right? Like even when we debated on like what should the leave policy look like, unlimited, what does that mean? And we are like, okay, we say 20 days. We are largely saying, if you feel you need extra 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, do you really have to go through a system or a bureaucratic way because you feel you need extra few days? And if you think that, suddenly people are gonna take like 60 days in the year, I think you have a very different problem in your company than a leave policy. So for us, I think it's true on how you put it, that just treating people as adults has to really be the underpinning of how you interact with them, and forcing them to check in at a time and stuff. It's it just kind of chips away at that assumption.
Glad that both of you are bringing out the human side about you. And we are leaving the corporate side right now out of this webinar and just focusing on how you remain human. So this is what also we believe in, in when we address our learners, we always look at the human, we always look at the heart. We don't just force things or force learning programs and so on. So anyway, just want to go into a little bit on the topic of how we can build back some hopes. So from what both of you have shared in terms of your personal approach to mindfulness and certain strategies, certain ways that you have both implemented, maybe can you share more in terms of how you can have the audience take away something immediate, let's say after this webinar, and something that they can implement or do as an individual or even for their organization. So we have two levels here. What are simple takeaways that anyone can do? I leave it open to you, Zephyr or Nandini, whoever wants to start first.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think just knowing, I think it's very important always, and for us it comes also in the way we talk to people about managing their financial state. It's knowing what your state is currently is really, really important to then be able to say, where do you want to go from there? So I think whatever helps you, in whatever way to get feedback from your teams in how they are feeling, or how empowered they feel, or how happy they are, in the context of your company, just first kick off by understanding, do I have a full picture of the current state? Because it's an aggregate result of people may leave out the individuality, and so doing that at a company level, but then doing that at understanding that at a department level, and at a smaller team level, where a first line manager can really bring the individual understanding of each team member is really important. So I would really recommend to ensure to make a very clear look at, do you know the current state? Zephyr, I'm sure you have how to get to places more.
Actually, I was excited to hear some financial strategies from you, and because as a creative who was in the music industry full-time, now I'm in it part-time. Let me just be frank and say 95% of musicians and artists are broke. Even the top artists in the world, they don't know what to do. They don't know where to get money. They don't know what to do. Yeah, so maybe if I'll share a little bit about what I've figured out on a personal level financially, but maybe you can share some more pertinent insights about really managing money, or wherever you want to take it. For me, I have realized that multiple income streams are good. And I've realized that you can actually tie these multiple income streams into mindfulness, because if you're mindful about your whole being, right, mind, body, spirit, you will start to understand what your passions are. You will start to understand your interests, whether that's baking cookies at home and then selling them, or that's learning guitar and then teaching it, and it doesn't have to be that fanciful and creative. It can also be something more technical like trading. Everyone is making money nowadays from different streams, and understanding what their interests are. And so I think the internet has pretty much solved that problem, and we now know how to bring in different levels of income, as long as we don't have many mental barriers. So that's being mindful of industry trends, but also being mindful of your own limitations, so a lot of mindfulness going on there. Basically, your mind has to work non-stop to be mindful, very conscious. Yeah.
Well, it does, right? And yeah, and look, from a financial perspective, an important thing for people to know is that how much your income is not determines how rich you are. It's your net worth. So your net worth, which is your income minus your expenses. And so you would be amazed at how many like you said, very rich musicians as well. I recently read the Elton John Me book, in which at one point of time he talks about going bankrupt, and you are like, how does Elton John go bankrupt? But because both your income as well as your expenses have equal role to play in what your net worth is, which actually defines whether you are actually building wealth for yourself, or you are actually eroding most of the wealth for yourself. So we usually, recommend to people to know very well where their expenses are, and to your point, to be mindful about how they spend it. So I have never used the budgeting app or anything like that, but I used to early on in my career, or when I started to have a little bit of money, manage it on paper and pen, and basically write everything down. But over the past years, I love the Japanese Cegos system, which kind of makes you put your expenses in 4 buckets. And I think I love it because it is a very mindful way of managing your money, because so you have your essential needs, so that's to put roof over your head, and it tells you should think about what is putting roof over your head and having just a gigantic place to live. And so your rent being a sufficient necessity versus being a splurge needs to be looked at in it. Food at the table, and there you actually are putting first fresh fruits, vegetables, everything that is goes towards nutrition. Then you have an education column, so education, which is either you're paying for schooling or you're paying for cultural activities. So I actually put concerts that I go to, my kids' piano lessons, or my own museum runs. They all go into the culture part, because you are mindful of how you are improving your life. And then you have a third column, which is about your wants. So if you're replacing a t-shirt that has torn or cannot be worn anymore, it can go into your necessity column. If you're just going and buying a blazer, and that's your 5th blazer this year, that cannot go in the necessity column. And then you have a miscellaneous one, which they recommend that you look at it very often to identify that there are not recurring items over there, because otherwise they should be split in one of the other 3 buckets. And I really find this, I found it very helpful, because for me, the necessity and as my children are growing, talking to them about needs versus wants has been a very important conversation. And obviously then, today with teenagers, if you are not walking the walk that you talk, there is no way to escape, right? So for me, it's been really helpful. And while I don't budget anymore on a monthly basis, I do spend a month a year actually re-looking at exactly this system to make sure that over the years, things are not creeping up in the wrong place. So I think understanding what brings value to you and whether your expenses are actually going towards that value creation is really important. And whatever isn't, you should be looking at it very carefully to then, push it to your net worth addition rather than leaving it in your expenses. Yes, because you can make huge differences without your income actually changing drastically. And everyone should be able to take care of their necessities and their education, especially in the context of the audience that we are talking to today, and ensure that their network continues to grow over time.
That's awesome. I was actually taking notes while you're speaking. Very, very useful.
Good. Therefore, speaking on that, so since Nandini has shared 4 buckets, right, the Japanese use to manage their expenses, do you have any any tips, insights yourself for or in your journey in your life that you can share with the audience?
Yeah. So we are just to check, we're talking about finance, right? Are we still on finance?
Yes, we're on finance. Finance is also
Okay. Yeah. So for me, yes, my character is more based on growth, and I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. And yeah, so based on this, I've been mixing around with different circles of actually high net worth coaches and also luxury coaches, where they sell one offer for 100K a month. So it's outside the high ticket realm, it's even higher. And so from what I've learned from observing all these coaches, musicians, and even corporate people, because my mom's also head of people development at a big company, what I've realized is that a lot of people are financially knocked off, not strictly in terms of finance, but in terms of their mindset, because this is about mindfulness. They get financial stress. And the biggest question I've heard, and the biggest worry I've heard is always, where is the money going to come from? Oh, I lost my job during this time. Oh, I don't have enough money to survive, pay bills. These are the words you hear, right? So to fix this, here's where I can contribute a little bit, is I really urge everyone to look at different streams of income and also investing in trading. I think a full spectrum is needed. Just like Nandini is talking about how to keep that money once you make it, I think we also need a full spectrum division of making money. Because if you look at this in the spiritual sense a little bit, money is just energy, right? So let's assume now I'm talking to a group of people who don't believe that money is evil, all that. We're over that mental barrier. We know that we need money. We like money. Okay, now that you clear that hurdle, the next thing we need to do is find ways of getting it in, because we're all here to serve other human beings, right? Whichever way you look at it, whether you're a CEO, you're a sweeper, you're a urban road development planning assistant, you're Beyonce, everyone is serving each other. And when you deliver value, you get back money. No value, no money, right? So this is like marketing 101. So to deliver value, we have to find the maximum ways we can deliver value to the planet through all our skills. And if we don't have skills, then build some skills. So, stop being lazy. Human beings are amazing creatures. Go build some skills. Even if somebody says, I just like nature walks. On your nature walks, you can take out your phone, and while you're inhaling the beauty, you can also take pictures and send these pictures to a nature blogger, or become a nature blogger yourself. And then other people over 5 to 10 years of building your blog will start to want to advertise. So that's an income stream right there. So people need to get a little more mindful about the way the planet's moving. And if you have if you have a day job with a large income, you're also more safe, but you're also more shaky if that's all you have, because you get used to a lifestyle. Not everyone's as disciplined as what Nandini was saying. So a lot of people I know get used to a lifestyle. I know some people in my family, I will not name them here, obviously, because everyone's on LinkedIn. So it's like, now I earn this much. It's not so much arrogance, it's just comfort. In the music space and on Instagram, you see a lot of memes which will say, you're never going to go backwards in lifestyle. So once you get used to driving a BMW, you're never going to get used to taking the bus. It's going to depress you. Once you get used to a $15 latte, you're never going to get used to a $1 latte ever again. So imagine what happens if you lose your job. You're going to be way more depressed than someone who loses a $1,000 job. And I've seen this happen. I had a personal friend, family friend. He's a financial controller of a huge company. Salary is around 25, 35K a month. So that family is used to a certain lifestyle now. Wife is a housewife, kids are going to international schools, expenditure is rolling, and suddenly, boom, he lost his job. And it went into a depression for like 6 to 8 months. So it's really important for everyone, not just people who don't have cash, but also people who do have cash, to start looking at other ways to serve the world, not just one skill. So yeah, that's what I'd like to add to just under Nandini's funnel of how to spend the money once you make it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so important to actually make sure that in the good times you are preparing for the bad times, because I think, psychologically you are in a better state to take more rational decisions, and understand your options better. So whether it's through insurance, whether it's through emergency funds. We always tell people, ensure that you have an emergency fund that can bridge you over, because they are all part of afterwards the mental stress that comes because you haven't prepared during the good times for the bad times. But if you have been if you have been paying attention to preparing for the bad times, not waiting for a bad time to happen psychologically, but we usually tell people 6 months of expenses is usually the benchmark for an emergency fund. But when you look at that number, which constitutes the 6 months, if psychologically it does not make you feel safe, bump it up. Because the work of an emergency fund is to help you feel safe. The emotional component of it cannot be detached. So if your emergency fund looks, at 6-month calculation, I don't know, looks at $20,000, $30,000, but you kind of feel like, I'm not sure I'm gonna be sleeping 8 hours every night, restfully, knowing I only have 30,000 in my emergency fund. Okay, then the right number for you is 40,000. The purpose is that it brings you, a peace of mind so that you can focus on other things. At the end, money is, as Zephyr said, it's a tool. Money is not, we need it, but it's not, it's just a means to achieve everything else that you want in your life, whether it's today or whether it's tomorrow during retirement. So I think things like, paying attention to an emergency fund, insurance, looking at your debt, not accumulating debts that you cannot take care of, or, taking on debts that put unnecessary financial stress on yourself, paying off high interest debts fast, and limiting them in the first place is really important. So I think they are all intertwined with you being able to feel what is still under your control, should there be unexpected events in your life.
Great. I like how you both tie in the financial part of individual safety to the emotional and psychological safety. So it gets someone to feel more peaceful and calm. Thanks for both of your sharing on some tips on expenses, control of expenses, as well as where to prioritize your funds, especially during good times rather than not only the bad times. Naturally, during the bad times, you do even more. So let me just take both of you a little bit, because I'm watching time and we probably got about 12 minutes on the clock for both of you. So as we talk about the financial mindfulness, and this, we're talking about individuals like you and I. It doesn't matter whether we're working for big corporations or you are running your own business. What can corporate employers do, or what can you do if you're an employer? So if in the audience there is anyone that's running your own business, what can they do to help enhance the emotional and psychological mindfulness of their people? Maybe we start with Zephyr.
Sure. So yes, I would say that I think your question is more on starting to become a little bit pandemic proof, right? And just prepare for these events and things like that. So I think that Obviously, a lot of companies are going to be holding workshops and things like that. So I don't want to say something like wholesome workshops. I know I sound a bit silly. So what I do want to say is that basically when a human being's balanced in terms of mind, body, and spirit, then there is very little that can phase a human being, right? So if we're talking about emotionally, for example, pandemic proof, yes, there's a financial side to that. But there's also, your mental stability. Because we've all heard those experiments where they take a millionaire or a billionaire, they wipe out their funds, and within 3 months, they're a millionaire again, right? Because they're financially sound, they know how to make money from nothing, and they also have to be mentally stable enough to, instead of depression for those 3 months, be building wealth for those 3 months. So I would urge companies to have an all-rounded development for any employee, and even if you're personally a business owner, for yourself and your staff, where obviously in life there's ups and downs. Even the richest people will say the same thing, and even the poorest people will say the same thing. Even people in war-torn countries will tell you their happy days, and even people in well-controlled places like Singapore will tell you their sad days. So I think if we're balanced as human beings on a mind, body, spirit level, which is tough, by the way, people take their whole lives to achieve this balance. It's not a weekend job. I think the companies are stepping in the right direction to help their employees on a personal level. They are helping their companies, obviously, because better staff means a better company. And they're also doing something more kindred for these human beings, even outside the company. Because as human beings, I think everyone is a natural teacher, by the way. So we can share our own experiences and teach other people who are just 1 or 2 steps behind on the same path. And so they're doing something very humane by letting, again, tying back to the earlier point of ours about letting them know that they really care, like what Nandini's company is doing, other companies are doing. Talking is one thing. Hi, how are you? I blah, blah, blah. And I had this for dinner and you had that. That's one thing, talking, but also really showing that they care by investing in the growth of their employees on a balanced level. So I think really activities for mindset, activities for spirituality, activities for physical fitness. Of course, don't forget your main company activity training, or everyone will just become a yoga junkie and then nobody's going to do any work. So yeah, that's from me. I think we need to develop balanced human beings. What about you, Nandini?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, for us, again, we always believe that, the money in your life is there to help you do everything else that you are passionate about, and to be able to invest both time and resources into it. But, from a company perspective, retirement for an individual is by far the most expensive goal in someone's life. And I think because companies play such a big role, of where payroll begins, I think ensuring that the little seed towards retirement, in Singapore, we have CPF, some other countries don't have plans like CPF. But, also there is more and more talk on, that CPF is not enough, or, even a lot of people don't understand how best to utilize CPF. But retirement as a goal is the most expensive goal of the life. So ensuring that, it's prioritized from the payroll, I think companies can play a very big role. And obviously, without any company becoming a nanny company, but it's just because the habits that it puts in, when you start from your first paycheck to put towards your retirement goal, the compound impact of it. So, we talk about compound interest impact continuously. The compound impact of it is just phenomenal, and not something that you can make up for by saying, oh, 20 years down the line or 15 years down the line, I will just earn more money. You know, your successful retirement shouldn't be based over you having to absolutely earn more money. And, you know, we are already talking about, you know, going off from a decent base. You know, most people have higher education, you know, they have a corporate job or they are working in a business. So their needs are taken care of from the paycheck. But putting towards your retirement from the day one that you start to earn is by far the best thing you can do to make that goal 100% achievable for yourself over, you know, your 30-year time period. So I do think that any role company can play in ensuring that there are proper retirement schemes, whether that's, you know, ensuring people understand how to use CPF or in other countries, but also looking at what supplementary should or can be done. I would highly recommend for HR departments and comp and ben departments to evaluate that.
Excellent. Thank you, Nandini, and thank you, Zephyr. Well, the show is not, it's almost over, but I'd just like to ask the audience at this point in time if there are any questions. If you have any questions, you can still squeeze in and we can still allow for one or at most two questions in case you'd like to ask our speakers. As what Nandini has mentioned earlier, ask me anything. I think that's a really good framework or approach that your, you know, intervention that you have rolled out in StashAway. So are there any questions at this moment? Okay, let me just do a quick check on the chat. Okay, I don't see any questions. Brianna, there's no questions, right? That's directed to you. Okay, so we are going to sort of end off this session, but before we do that, may I just ask Brianna to flash up a screen, a slide, because following this session, I'm sure that most of us or all of us would have gained very valuable insights from both Nandini and Zephyr, and probably you're dying to ask them more, just that, oh, Sean is cutting this session short. So you might want a further session. You might be interested probably in an in-house session if you are we're going to relate this to your companies, or you might even want to run it together with us for teams or your people. So we can invite you to scan this QR code. It's going to lead you to a Google form. A Google form that you can just fill up if you have any interest in having such a session. Of course, we can go more in depth rather than just today where we had a conversational dialogue between Nandini and Zephyr. But we can go more in depth if you like us to structure a session that is going to touch on how we can help your employees, your teams, your peoples, mindfulness in terms of financial wise, emotional, psychological, or in Zephyr's case, mind, body, spirit. So in this aspect, it's a very holistic aspect that I see. And because we, in this objective of this webinar, Cegos and StashAway has come together to really put across this as a giveaway during this period of time where we want to build back our hopes and dreams. So even if you don't have the question with you at the moment or you have nothing, you can just scan this QR code, take a copy, take a screenshot. Feel free to just reach out as well. I think both Zephyr and Nandini, both their names are on the screen. If you like, of course, you can also connect with them on LinkedIn. But before we take a final move, maybe I just like to give 1 minute each to Zephyr and Nandini to speak your minds, or maybe share what the audience can take away, or one tip for the audience.
Zephyr, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. For me, maybe I'll share my takeaways from what I learned from Nandini and what I've learned for myself in the past 1 year. That is to really diversify your income, diversify your development, so you're a more all-rounded human being. And today I learned that we have to diversify how we spend and put away our money to secure a nice, bright future for us. So yeah, that's from me.
Yeah, and equally for me, a great takeaway is, there's so much more that we can do for our employees, from some of the tips that Zephyr has shared, but also personally, right? I think cyclicality is part of life, and making sure that you continue to learn new ways to manage and be happy is super important. So I also thank you, Sean, for taking the notes and putting it down in the common document, because I'm very happy to see the notes to get some takeaways from Zephyr.
Thanks, Nandini. Yes, so you are also observing the notes. So while both Nandini and Zephyr are talking, I'm busy typing all their golden nuggets into this Word document. So maybe I'm just, this is off my head. I didn't plan this. And if any of you in this chat, I'm sure you probably want the notes. And if you have not been taking the notes, what I'll do with our team is we will condense the notes, of course, look nicer, look a bit more presentable, and we will send it out by email. So for those who have registered for this, and of course, for all of you who have taken time out during this 1 hour to attend this, and you like a condensed summary of the notes, I'll be very happy to send it over. I believe both Nandini and Zephyr, I have your permission.
Sure.
Okay, good. So, I mean, both of them are really, really, really very nice to share their personal tips, not just in a corporate company standpoint, not just for organizational standpoint, but in terms of their personal tips to an approach to mindfulness, whether it's balancing their financial aspect and their aspirations, or even their emotional, psychological safety aspect. And I believe that it comes hand in hand as what Nandini and Zephyr has both shared earlier. So it's a 1 hour webinar, and some of you who have probably taken out your lunch time. So I don't want to hold any of you back to work, people. I think if not, then we have not sort of achieved this objective of this webinar. So anyway, thank you very much once again. And of course, we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. On behalf of Cegos and StashAway, please feel free again to connect with us on LinkedIn, and we will send out an email after this on the notes, as well as most likely our team will also do a webinar broadcast replay. So thank you again, and have a great day, great week, and up ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.